Steve, it feels like the economy has definitely shifted a little bit, or at least consumer sentiment has shifted since I spoke to you last month. Have we seen any data to show that maybe the consumer is pulling back, or even that they just can't afford things anymore?
Well, Rick, look, thankfully, the government shutdown, which I think was playing a big part in the reduction of consumer sentiment, and that's completely understandable. I mean, this was just a self-inflicted kind of process that we were going through, and it lasted longer than any government shutdown that we've had previously to this. So, not surprising, consumers and even businesses were starting to feel a little bit unsettled. Thankfully, the government shutdown's over. We're going to get people paid as quickly as possible. There's still some question marks about how we roll out of this. But Rick, yes, I think that there's nobody that would say that the government shutdown improved the level of economic activity. So to the degree that as we were going through that, it has impacted consumers. We've seen layoff announcements go up a little bit. The hard part is we haven't gotten any government data. And as we come out of the shutdown, we're going to have to wait and see when some of that data is going to be released. It looks like October unemployment, they're not even going to mess with that. They're just going to go to the November unemployment report. And the Federal Reserve, for their part, as they're trying to think about what they want to do from interest rates, they did lower interest rates by 25 basis points at their last meeting. But the chances of them cutting in December have been coming down a little bit. I think this morning it's about a 50-50 chance, a coin flip. There have been any number of the Fed governors coming out and saying that they want to be a little bit cautious. Part of this is, Rick, it's kind of weird to me because most of while we're not getting actual government data, we still get some private survey reports out there. And just the general sense is that the economy's not doing as well. And yet the government saying, or the Fed is saying, hey, we need to hold off on lowering interest rates a little bit here. So there's a little bit of a mismatch there. But I think part of this, Rick, is that as we look into 2026 and 2027, there are a number of reasons to feel a lot better about what the economy may be doing at that point. So we're just kind of in this period where, man, thankfully the government shutdown's over. Let's get past that. I got to tell you, Rick, I traveled quite a bit during the government shutdown, and I want to do a shout out to the airport employees, TSA. They really did a fantastic job. I didn't have any real issues from a travel standpoint. I know that the air traffic controllers, we were cutting back on flights, and that may have gotten worse over time. I'm just glad the shutdown is over, and we can now start thinking, I think, a little bit more about what we're seeing in 2026 and 27, which is a little more positive.
How lost are we without that October data with inflation and unemployment? I imagine we're not guessing, but we're still trying to adapt to it.
Yeah, we're still trying to adapt, and it's like anything else. If you don't have information, then you don't feel like you have quite as good of a handle on what you should be doing. It raises the level of uncertainty. And Rick, when consumers are uncertain or when businesses are uncertain, what do? Generally, nothing. You just kind of stop and want to stand in place. That's a perfectly understandable, rational response. It doesn't help you achieve any goals going forward. So we don't want to be in that period of uncertainty for very long. That's why I'm hopeful that as we start to get the data out, it's not that we need actual October data to know exactly where we are. If we can pick it up in November, I don't want to say that we want to make that a habit where we go months without data, but we'll be fine once we can get the data that we start to get. It'll take probably 30 to 60 days before we're kind of back in that rhythm. But missing the October data ultimately is not going to be a huge deal for us going forward.
I've been looking at the consumer stocks like Chipotle and Cava and some other things, and they're saying people aren't eating out anymore. Does it seem like the consumer is tapped out, or the jokes are online of the portions are big, but the portions are small, but the prices are big.
Yeah.
What do you interpret as far as these restaurants just taking these hits?
Well, I think there's multiple factors at play here. One is, and I don't want to speak specifically about Chipotle per se, but if you've been to one recently, I was shocked at how expensive Chipotle was the last time that I went. And so it is if for a restaurant, if you're kind of in that fast casual, but you used to be a little more affordable, now not so much. It may be that your market has lessened a little bit. And I think what's really happening there, Rick, we've talked a little bit about this on a couple of past calls. We have what we call really a K-shaped recovery. And really what that means is that if you own your home and you are investing in stocks over the last 5 years, you've done fine. The stock market's up 200%, your home value's up 50%. And so yes, inflation, aggregate inflation is outpacing wage gains, but your overall financial picture looks okay. If you're not owning your home, if you don't own stocks though, that aggregate inflation and the term that we started to hear here in the most recent election cycle, and I think you'll hear more of this going forward, affordability. We've always measured affordability in the housing industry, but just general affordability. Rick, it's tough. If you're not in the stock market, if you don't own your house, affordability is really difficult. And I think at the base of that, people really understand that while the government's most recent measure of core inflation was at 3%, and remember when they brought the Bureau of Labor Statistics back to get the CPI report for October, because that had to set the cost of living adjustment for Social Security going into next year, which came in at 2.8%. I don't know a whole lot of senior citizens that are jumping up and down saying that 2.8% is going to make my life a whole lot easier as we get into the next year. My point there is, I think for most consumers, cost of living is going up faster than 3%. That's our personal rate of inflation. It's higher than that. When we get back to the consumer sentiment with all this stuff around the Affordable Care Act and the idea that health premiums are going to go up, if you've renewed your car insurance lately, if you renewed your homeowner's insurance lately, if you've gotten your property tax bill lately, all of those costs are up way more than the 3% level. So I think that this is where it's a battle for consumers. The thing that will hold us in, and I think this is where the Fed, the reason they started lowering interest rates again in September and they did again in October, is unemployment's still at 4.3%. Now, consumers can be squeezed, but if they have a job, they're in a lot better position to handle that than if they don't have a job. That's where we need to be very careful. We don't think that's going to happen. We're pretty optimistic on what the economy is going to do starting next year. So we don't think the consumer is going to get squeezed from that standpoint. But just overall, Rick, inflation's bad. It's an insidious tax that hurts those that can least afford it the most. And I hope the Fed does not give up the battle to get inflation back lower than where it is today.
What are your thoughts on could the Supreme Court ruling on tariffs lower the prices? And we're also hearing about this maybe refund checks. Any hope that could actually shift the price at the grocery store noticeably?
Well, it wouldn't necessarily shift the price of the grocery store, but what it might do is give lower income consumers some additional money to pay those higher prices. And I think that's really what happened during the pandemic. We had prices going up, but there was so much stimulus coming from the federal government, people could just keep paying those higher prices. I've got to tell you, I don't know what the structure of the $2,000 tariff refund looks like. It will be income limited. Obviously, that's actually fine. You want it to help those that most need it. Upper income people, frankly, just don't need the help of a $2,000 tariff rebate. But ideologically, why overlay a tariff if you're going to give a rebate? I mean, I think that seems to be a relatively inefficient way to provide some stimulus to a portion of your population. But back to your point about the Supreme Court, President Trump used an authority called the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, or IEPA, to levy those tariffs. That's what the Supreme Court is ruling on, whether he had the authority to do that. There's really two parts. One, they might rule that he didn't have the authority, but he doesn't have to refund the tariffs. The other, he could say you don't have the authority and you do have to refund the tariffs, or they could say you were fine and we just keep moving the way we are. What the market seems to be thinking is that the Supreme Court may very well rule against the use of IEPA as his authority. The president thinks he has the ability to levy tariffs using other methods. So importantly, what we would say is, we're not going back to the pre-tariff policy days. Tariffs are going to be an important part of how this administration collects revenue. If we have to refund it, man, I don't even know exactly how that would work. Who gets that money, when they get it? Bottom line, that is, though, we would probably have to issue debt to get those refunds out there. So all that means is that our deficit, which has been improving over the last few months, would probably take a hit, as we'd have to issue some additional debt to refund those tariffs. But the president's going to find a way to do that tariff policy going forward. It may just not be under the authority that he used to date.
Thank you so much, Steve. I appreciate it.
Rick, thank you. Appreciate it. We remain more optimistic than pessimistic. These are headwinds we got to get through, but there's a lot of reasons to feel better about the economy as we move into 2026 and 27.